Good day and welcome to day 3 of the coaching. So we've covered two very, I suppose, factual topics in the sense of we've literally talked through some of the principles regarding nutrition. We've discussed calories and how we can manage them, and then some considerations in and around kind of just strategies that should ultimately be the foundation of what we kind of work towards with our nutrition. And literally, if we just work through them, then we'll be in a absolutely fantastic place, regardless of kind of what goes on top of that, whether it's kind of further nutrient dense foods or whether it's the things that we generally enjoy. Hopefully, in an ideal sense, it will be a combination of both. However, if it does lean towards kind of that notion of the better things in some ways, then we still know that we'll be in an absolutely fantastic place, both in able to move towards our body composition goals, but also in terms of our health as well, and just reinforcing that there is no such thing as bad foods in isolation, and we have to look at a far bigger picture in terms of our diet. Today, what I want to kind of very briefly discuss is the notion of what we need to do to set ourselves up long term. We are basically going to run through a study, or it's a combination of about 3 different studies really, which look at people who have successfully dieted and then who either go on to maintain or have further success within their diet, or versus people who basically relapse and end up putting the weight back on. It's a very interesting and complex kind of area of study, but there are some common themes that I like to embed into all of my coaching. The first one that I kind of want to discuss, and one that you are basically all engaging in, which is absolutely fantastic, and is the notion of education. Every one of the people who successfully maintained or went on to kind of lose further weight had some element of education ingrained into their kind of actual diet plan. They learned what they were doing, whether it was knowingly or unknowingly, whether it was working with a nutritionist, whether a nutrition coach, or whether it was just kind of learning to read the back of food packets and starting to get a bit of a picture in and around calories. And so what I would urge you to do beyond the 7 days, and then going forward, is just make it part of it. It doesn't have to be anything. Yes, you can come in and work with a nutritionist and really kind of, and in some ways, just accelerate that learning. But just start to create awareness. Start to create awareness of calories. Start to create awareness in and around kind of protein. What is protein? What is a carbohydrate? What is fat? What is a source of calcium? What is a source of vitamin C? What is a source of vitamin D, etc., etc. And just start looking to loosely over the years, just kind of piece the jigsaw together. And that's a big consideration. But like I said, you're very much doing this. One of the things in terms of the study, it kind of discusses the brain responses within the diet, within successful dieters versus non-successful dieters, as we'll call them. And one of the things that was shown in the successful dieters is that there was basically an increased activation in prefrontal cortex. And so what this basically means is there is this notion called top-down processing, where they have this awareness of a bigger picture. They have this awareness of a longer term view. And so what they are able to successfully do is manage the calories in the way that we discussed the other day. To look at, okay, how have my calories been this month? How have my calories been over a 2-week period and a longer term period? And they're able to just be a lot more rational as a result. As well as that, there is the notion of a longer term kind of goal process. We're not thinking, well, I've got this X event in 4 weeks, I really need to kind of knuckle down to that. It's like, yes, I'm going to put in work to get to that 4 weeks, but beyond that, there's a much bigger objective and a longer term objective. And that's what I want you to think about. How many times do we rush these things? I've spoken before my kind of social media about the notion of aggressive dieting, of kind of really just plummeting calories through the floor. And I'll open-heartedly say that I've admittedly done it with clients before. I put one female on like 700-800 calories. But then within that, it's a very, very strict process of working towards a short time frame, being the first thing, but also knowing that there is that base of behaviours and kind of eating habits in place before we even delve into that. And some people, I would just say now, is that I would question with some people, like, are you even ready to diet? Do you have the foundation to be able to work through this? And that's a huge consideration. One of the other things that they noticed in the brain activity of the kind of the successful dieters is that there was decreased activation of the orbitofrontal cortex. So that's a mouthful. And basically this just decodes the reward value of food. So they start to just not associate huge rewards with certain food types. And this is a huge factor, and this is why restriction just shouldn't be a thing. We shouldn't eliminate masses and masses of food. Yes, you can kind of play around with certain strategies in terms of reining things back to aid our dieting efforts, but just on that, what I'm talking about is something called taste fatigue. I'm not going to delve into it. I'm not going to delve into it onto these in the 7 days, but it's just a strategy that sometimes we can kind of play upon to make adherence to our diet a bit better. Just for something for you to Google. But yeah, but in terms of on the whole, we are inclusive in our food choices because we want to rid of this notion of good and bad foods, but also just this notion of rewarding ourselves. So we only have this food as a reward, as opposed to having it just, the term I use is that you have unconditional permission. You always have unconditional permission to eat whatever food you want at any moment in time. So yeah, that is that's the kind of the main considerations in and around, I suppose, developing those behavioural habits, and which are a literal physiological response within the brain. Next one, another habit that they have in place, I suppose, is the support system. They have a strong support network. Now, how this looks is completely independent to you. It could be a very, very successful, very, very supported small group of friends or family. It could be all the way through to just having a working alongside a nutritionist or working alongside a nutrition coach. Or it could be a supportive community, a gym. I know there are some fantastic gyms that kind of are very, very community driven, and buying into something like that is actually huge. So the next thing that I would make you question is, how is my support system? How supportive are my friends? And I'm not saying if they're not supportive, get rid of them by any chance. However, I would just be like, okay, if my support network isn't coming from my friends, where is my support network coming from? Where is my influence coming from? And within that employs accountability to you. And it's a huge factor. I cannot understate the value of that in terms of a long-term success. It really, really, really does matter. In terms of the next two in particular that I kind of want to touch on, there are more than what I'm actually going to discuss, but I've kind of highlighted, I suppose, the top 5. The next one the next two are very much more practical approaches to our nutrition. And the next habit, and one that I really think that probably too much of us are guilty of, is the successful dieters really managed snacking. They really stayed on top of it, and it was either what I call purposeful snacking or planned snacking, or it was or they just kind of kept it to an absolute minimum. And that is something that I would look to kind of really evaluate in most clients' lifestyles, particularly if there is this notion of I suppose disordered behavioural habits when it comes to food, or because it just invites a window of opportunity to I don't want to say tarnish, because like snacking is really, really beneficial in some incidents. But can we be in a position where we just manage it, or we account for that? So the very, very common one is the notion of a pre-meal meal. So how many of us get in from work, we're absolutely hungry, but then we've got to cook a meal, our evening meal then, but whilst we're going through the process of cooking, we almost have a small snack in that respect. Yeah, and it's just something I would really look to rein back in, and just, can we have this notion of structure? Can we have this notion of structure within our eating? One of the things that I will say, and again, I'm only going to touch upon this, is the notion that so we have our satiety, or our hormones that kind of govern our hunger. The one is called leptin, which is the hunger that tells us, the hormone that tells us we're full. And the other is called ghrelin. Now, ghrelin in particular is a hormone that can be trained. So what the most common example is that I'm not really engaging in any form of intermittent fasting protocol or anything like that right now. So probably what happens is I kind of will get some form of hunger around 9 a.m. Whereas if I was to say tomorrow I'm not going to eat until 2, then I will get hungry again. However, if I was to be persistent with that, then naturally I'll just find my rhythm, and then I wouldn't get hungry until 2 p.m. And so that is, having some form of consistent structure to your mealtime is something to consider. But it's not the end of the world. And this is the thing, is that we often struggle with versatility. We struggle to be versatile. So when we are going to then maybe not intermittent fast and go and meet a friend for breakfast, then it can kind of in some cases throw us off. But it is a consideration to maybe implement that into your lifestyle, because it helps. It really, really does help. The next one is that there is a foundation of fibre, micronutrients, and healthy habits. I've tried to, there's a number of them, and I've tried to summarize them into one point. So fiber being a key one, obviously it's amazing for everything from cardiovascular health. It helps in satiety as well. And what it also kind of forces us to do, and why I've kind of put fiber as the headline of this one, is that it kind of almost forces to engage in some form of more healthy habits. So fiber, if we are hitting 35 grams plus of fibre per day, then it's probably going to mean that we are more likely to engage in things like cooking meals rather than eating on the go, and these kind of maybe meal prepping. And now I'm not the biggest like kind of you have to meal prep. We've all got our different situations. But if we can kind of engage in just investing some time per week, then it does make a huge difference in terms of just some form of prep. Even if it's as simple as just when you do your shop, cut your vegetables up and put them in your fridge, because you are far more likely to use them because they're far more accessible. Or I can just go into my fridge, grab a handful of pre-cut broccoli, throw it in the pan, and I'm much more likely to eat it rather than thinking, okay, I've got to chop this up. And so it's not necessarily meal prep, but it comes from a spectrum of cooking, just literally just cooking your meals, through to engaging in just a small bit of prep that's going to help us make our week easier. There are a wide variety of different strategies within this, but there's just a few. And then the last one is very, very, very much around our kind of mindset. And one of the strategies that were implemented by successful dieters, and this isn't a be all and end all. Like this last one is something that I try and get all my clients to engage in, and anyway, but non-successful dieters can do this as well, but I just think it's a really, really important one to touch upon, is that they practice gratitude. Now, gratitude is, there's so much positive research about it, that when gratitude is high, it is very, very difficult to experience pretty much any other emotion. When we are grateful for something, we cannot experience any other emotion. And so if we can kind of put ourselves in this state, and granted, there was always, I'm not going to say we're always going to be constantly on this gratitude highs, not at all. But imagine just starting your day every day, being able to feel positive, then it makes a huge difference. And I talk about just generating momentum and all these kind of things. And so what I get with all my clients is that it's 3 things per day. What are you grateful for? 3 things. And for me this morning, one was yes, there could be something like my wife as an example, but it could be anything from a great conversation that I had with a client yesterday, through to the coffee guy that in my local coffee shop remembers my order. And from like, it just allows you to really just appreciate the smallest of acts, things, etc. And so it's really something that I would I think can be a big role in terms of just changing a shift in mindset. And what it also does, which I encourage, is this process of self-reflection, to be like, okay, how do I feel today? How we're thinking about how we're feeling. We're thinking about the positives and negatives within our lifestyle, but really dialing in on the positives, and then it just allows us to snowball and build into it. I could do literally a 60-minute lecture on gratitude, but it is something that I think can be of huge value. If you have, I'm going to leave that there. If you have any further questions about any of those things, then please let me know. Thank you for tuning in if you're still with us. And then I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow. I hope you have a great evening wherever you are. And then any comments, please put them down below. Take care, guys.